We will begin the webinar now, so good morning. My name is Alisa Sladzinska, and I work for the City of Chicago Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, BACP. Welcome to the BACP Business Education Workshop Webinar Series. We have adapted our regular business education workshops at City Hall into these webinars until further notice. On behalf of our Commissioner, Rosa Escarino, I want to inform you that business licenses can be processed online where applicable by visiting chicagobusinessdirect.org. And any websites and emails that I mention will be posted in the chat box, so you could reference them there as well. And if you are part of the Business Startup Certificate Program, you can get credit for joining this webinar by sending an email to bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. If you want to learn about the program, please visit chicago.gov/business workshops. To help guide your business and employees during phase 4 of Chicago's reopening process, please visit chicago.gov/reopening. Also, BACP and the City of Chicago's Office of Emergency Management and Communications created Shy Biz Emergency Alerts. You can opt in to receive targeted emergency alerts for the business community. If you are interested, please visit chicago.gov/Shy Biz Alerts. And we encourage attendees to ask questions during the presentation. We will have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. Please use the chat box to ask your questions and send them to all panelists. And today's webinar will be 10 launch commandments, the 10 things necessary to launch and grow a successful business. It will be presented by Jason William Johnson, Director of the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at the Chicago Urban League. Welcome, Jason.
Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? I'm Jason Johnson. I'm the Director of the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at the Chicago Urban League. Really excited to facilitate this workshop this morning. So pretty much today, we're going to talk about a simple, cost-effective process for evaluating and launching new ideas for new products, businesses, and services. I call it 10 Launch Commandments. So I came up with this whole framework just from years of working with business owners and noticing the same mistakes that they were constantly making as far as when they were launching new ventures. And then once those ventures were established, some of the challenges they were making while running them. So pretty much some of the things that I'm going to cover this morning is, first of all, before we go into the commandments, defining entrepreneurship and its implications, because I think it's really important to kind of understand what the process is really about. We're going to do an introduction to entrepreneurial mindset and the entrepreneurial process. And then we're going to go into the 10-step process, what I call the 10 launch commandments, for evaluating and launching a new business, product, or service. So a little bit about myself. As I stated earlier, Director of the Chicago Urban League Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. I'm also founder of a startup called Cubicle Escape Club, a platform that helps full-time employees become full-time entrepreneurs. I'm a professor of industrial organizational psychology and organizational behavior at Illinois Institute of Technology. I'm a Forbes contributor, and I'm finishing a doctorate in organizational leadership. So that's a little bit about myself. So pretty much, what is entrepreneurship? So feel free to chime in during the presentation. This isn't one of those webinars where I just talk and there's no feedback. I love to get feedback. I love to have a dialogue. But I'll start off by asking, and maybe 2 or 3 people can answer, what is entrepreneurship in your eyes? Are people able to unmute themselves or?
So people are able to respond to questions in the chat box. So
Okay, got
once again, look at the chat box, everyone, and make sure you are sending your responses to all panelists to make sure Jason and I can view your responses. A couple responses came in privately to the host. Please make sure you are responding to Jason as well. So we do have a couple responses for what is entrepreneurship. One of the responses we have is taking calculated risks, out on a limb and moving forward with a business idea to make a profit. And another response is also risk taker, owning and operating a business.
Yep.
Yes.
So my favorite, so those are all, good answers, but my favorite, and a lot of people have different definitions of what entrepreneurship is, but the favorite one that I use was actually developed by Howard Stevenson at Harvard Business School. It's entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity without regard to resources currently controlled. I'm gonna say that again. Entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity without regard to resources currently controlled. That without regard to resources currently controlled is powerful. And the reason being is because basically this definition states just because you don't have access to a particular resource doesn't mean that you can't go ahead and move forward with trying to launch that business. So the implications of this is your current resources shouldn't limit your opportunity horizon. So the type of business you want to launch, whether it's a service-based business, technology-based business, something in entertainment, anything, your current resources shouldn't limit your opportunity horizon, because the major part of the entrepreneurial process is acquisition of resources. Purchasing, and another thing that is a common misnomer, purchasing expensive resources should be your acquisition strategy of last resort. So a lot of people think, oh, in order to launch this business, I have to buy a physical space, or I have to buy this equipment, or I have to this. Purchasing should actually be your acquisition strategy of a last resort. Leverage should actually be your primary strategy for acquisition of necessary resources. And we're going to talk about some leverage strategy. So leverage is basically accessing a resource without necessarily owning it. And one of the most important things in this process is don't say I can't, say how can I? And I'm gonna say that again. Don't say I can't, say how can I? When you say I can't because fill in the blank, or because it's phase one, my business is closed, I can't, operate, it kind of kills your creative process. You don't start thinking about other alternatives, et cetera, et cetera. But when you say my business is closed, how can I operate? How can I, release a product or service? How can I? It gets the creative processes going. So just the simple act of asking, how can I, can kind of help you on your entrepreneurial journey, and instead of saying I can't. So pretty much these are about 14 leverage strategies, and I've listed them in terms of cost. And when I say cost, not just financial cost, but personal investment, time, et cetera, et cetera. So the strategy for acquiring the resources for your business should be to start off with the minimal cost strategies to try to acquire resources, then moving on to the moderate cost. And if you can't acquire the resources necessary, through the minimal or moderate cost strategies, then you go through the most expensive, ways to leverage resources. So there's a couple of different strategies you can use. Borrowing, right? You can borrow a resource to execute, your business. So let's say, you want to launch a moving company and you have a friend that has a truck. You can borrow the truck from them and go out and, do the moving jobs, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe give them a little something for that. You can barter. Bartering is a powerful tool for small businesses, because pretty much it allows both businesses to get what they need. And the bartering relationship just strengthens the capacity of both of those businesses. You can share a resource, pretty much, share office space. There's shared kitchens. So sharing is another, strategy. And all of these are like, these green ones are least expensive. You can contract the resource, and then that's when we start getting into some more expensive costs. And then you can crowdsource a resource, you leverage other people's property. Leasing and renting is a bit more expensive. Outsourcing is a bit expensive. Licensing is more expensive. You can partner with others. You can operate on consignment. You can give equity in your business, and a lot of people aren't comfortable with equity. But I always tell people, if you're early on, your business is not worth anything. So you're saying, I'm not giving somebody 25% of my business, but you're not generating revenue, and you need these additional people in order to realize the business's potential, right? So a lot of times people are against giving equity, and I'm just thinking, what are your prospects of being able to launch this business or run it successfully without the necessarily talent to get it? And if you got the money to pay people, by all means, you can do that and control the equity in your company. But if you're starting out, you have limited resources, equity is a great way to get, the talent and the employees or the partners on your team that you need in order to succeed. Now, there's a whole process with, making sure that the equity stake that's given is the correct one. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with giving equity, especially when you're in the earlier stage of your company, because your company's not worth anything. And I always tell people 50% of something is better than 100% of nothing. Another approach is the ham and egg approach, and I'll explain that one in a little detail because that's a really great one. Collaborating, and then last but not least, exploiting your personal status, be it relationships that you have, be it your classification as a minority, which allows you to go after procurement opportunities and get certifications, but exploiting personal status is another one. So I'm going to go into detail with a couple of my favorite leveraging strategies. I talked about bartering, right? This one is powerful so basically the way you go about developing a bartering relationship with other businesses is you want to identify the knowledge, skills, and abilities you have that can be valuable to businesses that are also valuable to you. Then you want to identify potential bartering partners and set up a time to discuss the opportunity with them. And when discussing the bartering agreement, your talking point should primarily focus on how you can create value for them through the agreement. You already know the value that you're creating for yourself, so you don't got to talk about what you're getting. It's most important to talk about it from the perspective of the value that they're going to be receiving. And it should be legitimate value. So I'm gonna use an example. I had a relationship for years with the photographer who we bartered services. So I provided him with business consulting, business coaching to help him grow and scale his business, and he provided me with photography, as an exchange. So it was 3 hours for coaching a month, straight for 3 hours of photography. When I had events, when I had workshops, he would be there, taking pictures and things like that. So I never had to worry about photography and documenting things, through pictures. He never had to worry about, having to pay for a consultant, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a win-win situation. So if you can create those type of situations, you can reduce your expenses, and you can acquire resources that you need in order to, grow your business. So think about how you can create bartering relationships. This other approach called ham and egg, where you use one resource to obtain another. So this is an example. Let's say you have Tom and he needs a chief technology officer and a chief marketing officer for his startup idea. And so he targets Mary for his chief marketing officer, and he targets Bob for his chief technology officer. They're familiar with one another's work, but they don't know each other personally. So the ham and egg approach is this. Tom tells Mary he's in final discussions with Bob becoming his CTO. Based on that, Mary decides to join. And then he tells Bob that he's in final discussions with Mary about becoming CMO. And then, he decides to join the venture. So he was able to leverage both of them to secure both of them before securing either one of them. So, ham and egg is a powerful approach that you can use. Another way you can use ham and egg is, let's say, you have a consulting business. You go to like a Fortune 100 company, you do some free consulting, You make sure in the agreement that you're able to, promote that you did this for them. You can even white paper it, et cetera, et cetera. Now you're able to leverage that first company that you did the pro bono project for into an actual paid gig with another company of that's of equal stature and status and things like that. That's another example of a ham and egg strategy. So ham and egg strategies can definitely be used if you're able to take one resource and leverage it into getting another resource. So that's another great strategy you can use in order to acquire the resources to run your business. Then last but not least, this is my third favorite one, OPP, other people's property. Those of you who are old enough to remember that song. Um, so examples of these can be Uber and Lyft using other people's vehicles. And they're one of the largest taxi companies in the world because they call them ride shares, but it's a taxi concept. And they don't own any vehicles. Airbnb uses other people's homes. For all intents and purposes, it's a chain of hotels, but they don't own any property. Roadside assistance services uses the service providers' vehicles and tools. So the key point is that you don't have to own a resource if you can create a system where you can access the resource by creating value for the resource owner, that it can be leveraged for your venture. Another example of this is let's say you don't know how to cut hair or you don't know how to do hair. That doesn't stop you from owning a salon. If you create the system, the physical location, the equipment they need, and you charge a booth, you can leverage their expertise, you can leverage their hair products, their equipment as far as their clippers and everything and all of that, and then you can create value that way. So the thing is, leveraging other people's property, other people's expertise, other people's knowledge can definitely be utilized to help you grow the business as well. So also, you need to have an entrepreneurial mindset. So entrepreneurial mindset can be defined in terms of beliefs. So people who have entrepreneurial mindset have a certain set of beliefs, and then they operate with a certain set of behaviors. So people with an entrepreneurial mindset believe that they can impact and influence their environment, right? So they feel like that they can they feel like they can, they have what's called a sense of high self-efficacy. They feel like, okay, I can make an impact, I can make a change, I can change my circumstances, I can change this industry. They have a firm belief in their ability to influence the environment. They also have a healthy dissatisfaction. So they always believe they can find a better way. So they might be walking down the street and they might be at a restaurant and they might be like, well, the food's good, but the customer service was terrible. If they did this, and this, that would improve it. Matter of fact, I'm gonna go launch my own, right? So they keep what's called a healthy dissatisfaction. They're always looking at how things can be improved, how processes can be improved, how operations can be improved, and then they try to do it, because oftentimes those improvements can be the incremental difference to really differentiate you in the market when you're when you got competition. They believe that opportunities are everywhere. Like the Jay-Z rap record. I'm a hustler, baby. I can sell water to a whale. Put me anywhere on God's green earth. I triple my worth, right? They believe that there's opportunities everywhere. So pretty much entrepreneurs are always on the prowl. People with an entrepreneurial mindset are always on the prowl, always on the lookout for opportunities. They embrace innovation, change, and growth. So whenever change and innovation happens, they feel like that's the time that's ripe for opportunities. So even right now, with everything going on with COVID-19, people with an entrepreneurial mindset, they're viewing this as a chance to do something new, to grow their business, or to figure out a new business idea. They're always looking at, ways to innovate. They're comfortable with innovation, change, and growth. And then last but not least, they're not afraid to fail. They feel like failure is learning. They say, I don't lose, I learn. So pretty much they feel like the perfect example of the I don't lose, I learn mindset is Thomas Edison with the light bulb. Some people say it took them 10,000 tries, 10,000 configurations in order to get to the perfect configuration. Now, every time he had the wrong one, he didn't say, oh, I suck. Oh, I keep on failing. I'm just going to give up. He's like, oh, that's not the right configuration. Let me try this filament instead. Let me try this material instead. And every time he lost, he learned, right? And those losses eventually gave him the learnings to come up with the correct configuration. Now, oftentimes, that's all it takes in business. Like, you may fail, but as long as you're able to kind of learn from it, make adjustments, and you're able to persevere, eventually you figure out the correct configuration. The market tells you eventually. So they have that I don't lose, I learn mindset. And the behaviors that people with the entrepreneurial mindset typically have, they act quickly on opportunities. So there's no, oh, let me write my business plan, my 30-page business plan before I go check this out, et cetera, right? And I'm gonna show you a tool that you can use to act quicker while still, making sure you plan the business. And that's one of the 10 launch commandments, plan the business. That's more important than having a business plan. But they quickly evaluate the situation, they quickly plan, and then they act on the opportunity as opposed to holding off, being procrastinating, things like that. Because the thing is, if failure is feedback, you get out there, as long as you're minimizing your risk, you'll be able to persevere long enough to learn, make mistakes until you figure it out. They persevere through setbacks. That's another thing. They leverage resources. That's the reason I talked about leverage, without necessarily having to buy them all the time. They act as a guerrilla. So they take that guerrilla warfare approach in order to run their business. So, for example, instead of paying for the Facebook marketing and the Instagram marketing, what they might do is they might go into like the Facebook groups where that have all of their ideal customers in there, engage in the group, become part of the family, and then they're posting about their business and people are buying, right? So, that's just an example of using that guerrilla strategy. One of the things that they do is, entrepreneurship is risk, but it's mitigated risk. So you think about all of the ways that you can reduce risk before you act. And you do that quickly, but you just don't jump in without evaluating, looking at potential risk factors, things like that. You attempt to mitigate the risk and then you act. Then, people with the entrepreneurial mindset, they adapt easily. When things change, they're like water. They're able to flow, they're able to take the shape of whatever's going on. And then last but not least, they exhibit passion for what they do. So those are some of the behaviors and beliefs of people with the entrepreneurial mindset. So pretty much when you look at the entrepreneurial process, there's 3 stages. There's opportunity identification. So that's when you're kind of figuring out what type of business you're going to launch, what customer pain point you want to solve, things like that. Then there's opportunity exploration, where you're testing it. And that's a huge mistake that a lot of people who are launching businesses make. They don't go through the opportunity exploration stage where they're able to mitigate their risk and they're able to test whether or not the product or service that they're launching is something that's actually viable, right? Then once you kind of get what's called product market fit, when you explore the opportunity and you identify, okay, this is the correct configuration, then you exploit the opportunity, which is opportunity exploitation. You invest more money, you do your 3-year projections in your business plan, you increase your investment in the processes that have been proven to work through your exploration, and then you move forward. So today's workshop is going to really focus on opportunity identification and opportunity exploration, because those are the 2 areas that a lot of business owners tend to struggle with when new entrepreneurs or existing entrepreneurs launching new products or services, right? So the 10 launch commandments, we're going to really talk about these 2 areas today. So just as a warm up to get you guys going, I believe in the power of music. I used to rap back in the day. Y'all can tell me if I'm still any good, but I created a video outlining the 10 launch commandments. So here we go. It's the 10 launch commandments. Go. I've been doing the startup thing for a minute. Launching ventures, running entrepreneurship centers, teaching business and leadership at universities. I kind of know what I'm talking about. Let me drop these jewels for y'all. I've entrepreneured for years. The lessons were valuable. There's rules to launch your ventures. I wrote you a manual, a step-by-step booklet for you to make your venture pop so you won't fail or flop. Number one, start with the customer problem. If the pain's big enough, they give you money to solve it. Doing research by talking to the potential customers about your idea is essential. Two, treat it like a science project. Don't fully invest without product market fit, because ideas that lack validation puts many new founders in bad situations. Three, launch with the MVP, a basic version of your service. Make sure that it's wanted, because if it doesn't pop off with your first version, you need money to pivot and make changes for certain. Four, you do this biz because you enjoy it, but don't get caught in the trap of self-employment. Put systems in place where others can do the work, then watch your venture scale while you chill at the resort. Number five, understand your values and your why. Create a mission and a vision by which you can abide, because all money ain't good money for sure. If your mission don't align with an op, close the door. Number six, make a brand promise and deliver. End up with Yelp reviews that make your fans shiver. Consistency is key when establishing the brand. One bad interaction can make a client scram. Number seven, metrics is the key to success, especially if you need an angel to invest. Learn the metrics that helps your business grow, then set your outcomes and exceed all your goals. Number eight, always make sure that you're planning. Sketch your venture out with a business model canvas. Write a business plan if you're looking for investment, and be prepared to answer any and all questions. Number nine, if you really want to get the cheese, go B2B instead of B2C, because businesses will always have a need, and consumer marketing is challenging indeed. Number 10, know who your customer is, what their interests are, where they work and live, because understanding customer behavior will be your savior. And if you don't, tell your new venture later. Remember, new founders, failure is feedback. You're still in the game as long as you bounce back. And this right here concludes the launch rap. NotoriousDIZ.com is where I'm at. Facts. Look, it's the 10 launch commandments. It's the 10 launch commandments. It's the 10 launch commandments. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right. So that's the 10 launch commandments. So those are the things that we're going to actually cover today. Pretty much there's 10 commandments that I typically tell business owners to abide by. Number 1, start with the customer problem. Number 2, create a science project. Number 3, create a minimally viable product or MVP. 4, put systems in place. 5, abide by your mission, vision, and core values, something that a lot of business owners underestimate the importance of. Number 6, consistently deliver on your brand promise. Number 7, metrics are the key to success. 8, plan your business. 9, create a big B2B business model. And number 10, know your customer. So those are the 10 launch commandments, and that's the end of the workshop. Now I'm playing. We're going to go into each of them in greater detail. So number 1, start with the customer problem. Great businesses solve a problem for a customer. I mean, at the end of the day, entrepreneurship isn't necessarily about, oh, I have this dream. It's about your dream also providing significant value for customers. If your dream business doesn't provide significant value, then you won't be in business, because at the end of the day, entrepreneurship is about exchange. I mean, business ownership is about the exchange of value, right? You provide a product or service, that's valuable to customers, and they, basically, pay you they basically pay you, right? They give you something of value, money, right? In exchange for that product or service, right? So pretty much great businesses solve a problem for customers. So when you're at the stage where you're trying to launch your business idea, the number one thing you should be focusing on is what's a customer's pain point, right? A lot of business owners start with the solution first. You should start with the customer pain point, right? What is the customer experiencing that your product or your service can solve for them, right? Number 2 is you want to also look at how they're currently solving it. Why? Because that's your competitors. So pretty much your competition isn't just other businesses, it's other ways to solve the problem. So for example, if you're a hair salon, your competition isn't just other hair salons, it's YouTube, it's the Instagram influencers, it's all of the other ways that people can do their hair DIY, right? So now you're not only just competing with other hair salons, you're competing with all these other DIY options for women to do their hair or gentlemen to do their hair as well. So when you're developing your when you're trying to figure out how to solve the customer pain, you have to take into account what other how you're better than other competition, as well as those other alternatives. So those are the two things that you want to think about when people say, "Well, I don't have no competition." If it's not a physical business, it's a way of solving that problem that you're competing against, and you have to demonstrate that your product or service is superior to that alternative. Another way you want to, and so how do you do that? You have to identify how the way they're currently solving the problem is deficient. So pretty much these other hair salons are great, but they don't offer braiding service, and the waits are long, and all of these different things. So you figure out everything that's wrong with the competition, and then in your value proposition, in your product or your service, you should be addressing those deficits. And how is doing your hair yourself, deficient? Well, it's time consuming. It requires a lot of research. You might get varying perspectives from other people, two influencers on Instagram, and you may not know which direction to go in. So pretty much you want to think about the deficiencies. And I always tell people, when you're launching a business, you should know your competition just as good as you know your actual business, because knowing your competition should inform how you decide to develop that product or that service. And then, you want to think about what is a better way to solve the customer's problem. So you looked at the pain that they have, looked at how they're currently solving it. You figured out how they're currently solving it is deficient. Now your solution, it should be the better way, taking all those things into consideration. So when you're, and the thing is, this isn't just something that you want to do as a new business owner. If you're an existing business owner and you're not getting sales the way you feel like you need to get sales, you might want to go back and explore this. Are you really solving the customer's pain point? Is there legitimately a pain point that exists? Is this something that's a necessary, or is this something that's nice to have? Because nice to have, people put off. But if the pain point that you're solving is so pressing, people gravitate to it faster. So pretty much, let's say you don't have an opportunity. You just say, I want to launch a business, but I'm not quite sure what direction I want to go into. These are a couple ways to find opportunities. First of all, you want to go back and look at your career knowledge, because 60% of entrepreneurs launch ideas in their industry. Why? Because they already know the customer pain point. They already know the competition. They already know the limitations of the competition, and they might have already thought of a way to solve it better beyond the scope of where they're currently working at, right? So oftentimes, new business ideas are often started based on people's career knowledge. And then the thing is, if you've gotten into that career, I'm not saying everybody loves their job, but if you've chosen a career that there should be a little passion associated with it, right? So that's the reason career knowledge is typically the number one place where entrepreneurs get business ideas. Another thing you want to look at is gaps in service. Let's say you live in Bronzeville, right? And let's say everybody in your neighborhood within a 5 or 6 block radius has like poodles, all type of puppies, dogs, et cetera, et cetera. But then the closest doggy spa is like 5 miles away. That's a gap in service, right? So then a doggy spa in that particular area may be a particularly great business opportunity. So you can look at gaps of services as another way to evaluate opportunities or to find opportunities. Another one, and a lot of people aren't familiar with this one, is what's called a bug report. So a bug report is a journaling process. And let's say you want to launch a business and you don't really have an idea. You can just think a bug report is literally a journal of everything that bugs you. So for like the next 2 weeks, you write down everything that annoys you, right? So maybe you're like, man, I hate that I got to drive 5 miles to MacArthur's. It'd be great if there was an amazing soul food restaurant in this area. Problem, right? Oh, I hate tying my shoes. It'd be easy. It'd be amazing if my shoes can tie themselves. Or maybe you are that person who owns that dog, and it's like, man, I hate that there ain't no doggy spot around here. I gotta drive 5 miles to PetSmart, right? So the bug report is you write everything that annoys you, everything that you identify as a problem, everything that you wish you could have had, and then once you're done, you go look through all of those opportunities and you evaluate them and you see if there's any one that you want to explore. Not launch automatically, explore, right? The exploration process is the part that a lot of business owners miss out on. New knowledge and technology leads to new opportunities, right? So when the iPhone came out and they came out with the App Store, it allowed Uber to exist. It allowed, Lyft to exist. It allowed every phone app-based business was allowed to exist based on the new technology of the iPhone and the iPhone App Store, right? There's some emerging opportunities with virtual reality, new technology. So there's going to be new business ideas, new problems to solve using virtual reality. So new technology, new knowledge also leads to a way to look for new business opportunities. And then last but not least, and this one is very apropos for the times that we're living in right now, disruptions and crises, right? So disruptions and crises, oftentimes there's a breakdown in normal society where there's new problems that emerge. So, for example, once the pandemic happened, people weren't able to go out, right? So then you have D Nice who come up with Club Quarantine, and Timberland and Swiss Beats took it one step further and came up with Versus, right? So they just got to deal with Apple for Versus, to show Versus exclusively on, Apple TV, in addition to their Instagram page. So pretty much that wouldn't have got launched if we weren't all stuck in the house, right? So disruptions and crises are other ways where businesses can launch. I believe Allstate Insurance launched during the Great Depression in the 1920s and early 1929, early 1930s. So disruptions and crises are often, the impetus for new business ideas to launch. I saw a question about how do you break into a highly regulated business industry? I think the thing with regulation, there's a couple, it depends on how, I think part of it is part of your risk aversion appetite. But think about what Uber did. Like taxis are a highly regulated, and a highly regulated industry, or were for the most part, and Uber broke into it. Oftentimes you find the gaps. So when things are highly regulated, that means they're highly defined. That means they're highly structured. There's a finite set of laws and rules, and none of those things are always written perfectly, right? So what ends up happening is you can try to identify the gaps in the regulation. Where are the places within the law and the rule where you doing something isn't illegal, right? Because it hasn't been accounted for, right? So the thing is that if you can find a way to disrupt, that's why they call it disruption. If you can find a way to disrupt, as Uber did. So, okay, you have to have a medallion for taxis, but there's nothing that said, a person couldn't share their ride, or share their vehicle for a fee, right? There was nothing that said that a person who owned their own vehicle couldn't do it. And that's where Uber found the gap. Now, eventually they regulated that. So regulation is always behind, right? Because as innovation happens, regulation has to come behind and kind of, regulate. so pretty much if you understand the laws, if you understand what you can do and what you can't do, and if you're able to find an opportunity within that, then pretty much there's an opportunity there. The only concern is that it gets expensive later on if you're not able to get off the ground running and move fast the way Uber was able to quickly generate revenue, because they needed money for legal fees after a while to fight regulation and things like that. But there's if you can kind of find the opportunities within, then where it's not illegal, it's just not accounted for, then there's the opportunity to break into a highly regulated industry. So after you identify the customer problem, you create a science project, right? So I'm sure you guys remember, 5th grade science class, the scientific method. So number one, you identify an opportunity, right? Which we just did in step one. Then you do your background research on the opportunity. Background research, talking to potential customers, kind of understand what they're, so you have an idea for this particular business. You want to do your background research, talk to customers about, okay, what the challenges they are, what they're facing, whether or not this a product or service of this type would be valuable to them, et cetera, et cetera. Then, based on the research, you develop a hypothesis, which is going to be the first version of your product. So the popular term minimally viable product is, the version of your product that you can release with the minimal cost to test whether or not there's value to it. I have a different approach that I utilize as well that I call the RNO, which is your right now offering. So what offering can you offer right now without spending money, without significant investment, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll go into what that is. So then you develop your MVP or your RNO, which is your hypothesis. Then you conduct the experiment, which is basically trying to sell the product or service, or if it's an app, getting signups, et cetera, et cetera. But you don't want to just do that without KPIs or key performance indicators, right? So you want to be able to understand, you want to be able to set targeted targets, set a timeline, see if you hit those targets, and then that lets you know whether or not you need to move forward with the opportunity or you need to make adjustments and make changes, right? So then once you conduct the experiment, you're analyzing the results and you're drawing a conclusion. And based on that conclusion, it may be like, okay, this is the product that's going to move me forward. Let me go ahead and scale it. Or, there's some things that people don't like about it. Let me make these adjustments. Or this is not a viable idea. Let me go ahead and stop wasting my time and do something else. So when you look at the science project, you don't just do it one time. It's a cyclic process. So you're identifying an opportunity, you're doing background research, you're forming a hypothesis, you're conducting the experiment, you're analyzing the results. Based on those results, you're making adjustments to that opportunity, you're doing background research, forming a hypothesis, conducting an experiment, analyze the results, and you just rinse and repeat, and you do this until what's called product market fit is achieved. Product market fit is basically when you come up with the configuration of your product or service that you can predictably get revenue from for a specific customer. So that, okay, this is the product or service that this particular customer with this particular pain point wants. How do I know that? Because they're buying it, and I'm able to replicate, customer purchases consistently enough where it's almost predictable. Where I know on average, this is going to do X amount a month, or I know that if I market it in this particular way on this social media platform, with this particular offering, I'm gonna get these results, right? So you get to that point before you significantly invest in the business. So that's when you pour your life savings in. You don't pour it in during the scientific project. The science project, you pour it in after you're able to identify product market fit, if you will. So next, pretty much, step 3 in this was form a hypothesis, which was create an MVP, right? So MVP is a minimally viable product. It's a lower fidelity, inexpensive version of your product or service. It should only be sufficient enough to test your hypothesis. It should only include your product or service's most vital features. So the core features of your product or service should only be included in your minimally viable product. So all of the bells and whistles and the nice to haves and the upgrades, you don't include those to test. Why? Because you're trying to save money. You're trying to conduct an experiment in an inexpensive way to see if there's demand for the product or service before you make a significant investment. Because the thing is, if you test it using a minimally viable product and you're not spending a lot of money, then that allows you to make adjustments because you still have resources. When you run out of cash, it's hard to make those adjustments. But if you're watching how you're spending, or you're not spending at all to test the value, the validity of the product or service, it allows you to stay in the game long enough to make adjustments until you're able to figure out the correct configuration. So examples of minimally viable products There's the concierge MVP, and some of these apply to technology businesses because those are the most expensive to launch often. A concierge MVP is, let's say you want to launch an app that does A, B, and C, right? You do A, B, and C manually first and see if there's demand for that. So when I launched the technology platform called Convo a few years ago, it's an app that used personality compatibility to help people break the ice at networking events. We did the personality powered networking event prior to building the app. So we used to do so the app told you, you know, your personality compatibility with everybody in the room. It gave you conversation starters to let you know, the best way to initiate a conversation with individuals. And then it also told you things that you shared in common with individuals. Prior to launching the app, we had an event called Personality Powered Networking, where we created a 5x7 card that had a 4-question personality test on one side, and on the other side, you know, it had the personality information for each of the 4 personality types. And then at the event, everybody got a big name tag, you know, with a color that let them know who they, you know, what personality type they were. So you can look at that card and you can be like, oh, this person is a manager. And you can read, okay, how do I approach managers, initiate conversation, et cetera, et cetera. And then we did surveys at the end of each of those events, and we found that 90% of the attendees found it valuable. That's when we went ahead and spent the money to launch the app. So that's an example of a concierge MVP. Then there's what's called the Wizard of Oz MVP, right? So on the front end, everything looks automated, but on the back end, you're doing everything manually. That was actually Groupon's approach. So before Groupon automated everything, you would go to Groupon, they had a WordPress page, and you would order a Groupon. They would create the PDF themselves on the back end and email it out to individuals. And then that allowed them to test the value. That allowed them to test the value of their platform, you know, before spending a whole lot of money. In their instance, though, they actually spent a whole lot of money to begin with. They messed up, and then they had to go back to the drawing board. Since they had no resources, then they had to do the MVP. So that's how they ended up So they actually ended up in a situation in reverse. Then also there's explainer videos, right? This is the one that Dropbox used. So pretty much before Dropbox wrote a single line of code, Dropbox created an explainer video. Oh, this is what Dropbox does. It allows you to store all of your files in the cloud, access your, you know, files anywhere. Dropbox, right? And then what they did was they created a waiting list, and they saw who signed up. When they saw they had thousands or hundreds of thousands of signups, that's when they went ahead and launched the idea. And they were even able to take that. See, we got all these people who are interested in this offering, and they probably leveraged that to get some additional investment, right? Let's say you have a business that's like a service, right? Let's say you want to launch a boutique. You know, your long-term goal is to get a brick and mortar boutique, or your long-term goal is to have a restaurant, right? Pop-ups are a perfect way to test the value, right? And to develop a following, because once you end up with that significant overhead, you don't have time to be trying to get customers. Like, you need to already have a following when you're entering a brick and mortar. So pop-ups are a perfect way to do that, right? And obviously, once the pandemic, you know, lets up, this would be more of a viable option again. But pretty much, you know, instead of like, you know, I have a colleague, you know, Whitney Gardner, launched the jerk chicken restaurant, FH Jerk, but he was doing pop-ups across the city prior to launching his business. And that's how he was able to develop his following. That's how he was able to get demand, get feedback for recipes and things like that. And then he launched his actual restaurant business. So pop-ups can be really useful as far as an MVP as well. Again, you're trying to spend the least amount of money possible to identify, you know, the whether or not your product or your service is something that people want. Pretty much, I'm having a hard time seeing the chat. What was that last question? I found it. For online business, would the explainer video be something we could use versus pop-ups? You sure can. Absolutely. Explainer videos are really good. That's what Kickstarter is. Like, a lot of people, all Kickstarter is a platform for explainer videos. That's what Kickstarter is. Because a lot of times people are launching businesses, but then when they do the Kickstarter and you pay, that's before they've released the product. That's why it takes you a year to get it. But yeah, that's all Kickstarter is. It's an MVP platform for, full of explainer videos for people who are trying to test the value of their opportunity. And if people vote with their dollars, they know it's a great opportunity. So and then last but not which brings me to Kickstarter, and crowdfunding campaigns, and then also landing pages. And the thing is, the landing pages, along with the explainer video and the Kickstarter campaign, can all be utilized, together, right? So you can have your landing page, which explains the product or service, along with the explainer video with the email sign up, right? Or a link to your Kickstarter. So these can be used in combination as well. So then there's the concept of what I call the right now offering. And part of the reason I kind of came up with this concept is because a lot of business owners always say, well, once I get this, I'll be able to launch this. Or once I do this, I'll be able to do this. Or once I get this amount of money, I'll be able to do this. And so my whole thing is what can you do right now, right? So the right now offering, or what I call the RNO, is what you can offer, or you can create right now to address the customer problem, right? So the things you want to consider is your current constraints, situational and environmental, right? Pretty much your situational constraints may be I don't have enough capital. Your situational constraints can be, I need to, I don't have enough skill in this area. Your situational constraints can be a variety of different things, right? Your environmental constraints can be your social distancing. We're in phase 4. The regulatory environment has changed, right? So you want to take those into consideration, because those are what limit what you can do, right? So they basically create the parameters by which your offering has to exist within those parameters, because right now they're barriers. Now eventually you get to the point where you're able to scale past those, but beginning, those are the parameters in which you have to operate. But then you want to think about what your knowledge and your skills, you want to think about your knowledge, your skills, abilities, and other characteristics. So what knowledge do you have, right? What skills do you have, abilities you have, and other characteristics such as, passion, talent, interest, things like that, right? So let's say situationally, you don't have you don't have experience in that particular industry, or let's say you don't have enough subject matter expertise. You might look at your relationships, which is another thing you can leverage, right? And all of this is leverage. All of this is leverage that I'm showing right now, right? Okay, well, I can't build this app, but I have a friend that I went to grad school with who builds apps. Let me reach out to him, right? Or maybe he can introduce me to somebody, right? So then you want to leverage your relationships as well, right? Well, I know 13 people who would be interested in this type of product or service that I have great relationships with right now. Let me reach out to them. Maybe these are my first couple customers, right? So you're thinking about your leveraging your relationships. Last but not least, you want to leverage your resources, the ones that you own. Now, with this process, you're not buying any additional ones. Only leverage the resources that you already own, right? And then you want to think about what resources you can leverage, right? So once you kind of know what skills you have that can contribute to solving the customer problem or knowledge, once you think about how your relationships can solve the customer problem, and once you identify the resources that can be used, you can create some version of the offering to create value for the customer, right? Which basically ends up being your MVP. So I think about it as far as your RNO. What can you offer right now that can address the customer problem, based on the current constraints, your knowledge, skills, abilities, and other, skills, your relationships, and your resources. And if you take this approach, you'll come up with something, right? Because the goal isn't to come up with the idea that you have in your head. The goal is to come up with something where you can start generating revenue, you can start getting customers, et cetera, et cetera. Then you can expand that offering long term. And then, you can build it to the point where it eventually becomes the ideal thing you have in your head, if that's what the market wants. Huge caveat. Because a lot of times what you think the market wants isn't what they always want. I saw a question. For explain online course, I would do a one pager with explain a video, see if people would sign up for a waiting list or to see if there's interest for opening the course. I just want to make sure I'm understanding, maybe do a freebie that adds value in my niche, to give them a teaser of what the course would be. What I would do, one approach you could take is like a explainer video, or you could do a masterclass. Masterclasses are another popular thing. And with the masterclass, what you would basically do is just a high level explanation of what your class will offer. So the thing is, like so there's modules, and then there's actual lessons within a module. The masterclass is just covering your module content, a general overview of the module content, where people are able to get some value, but not as much. But you don't give them the whole secret sauce, right? And I actually would charge for that starting off, because the thing is, the problem with free events and free workshops is that, number one, it doesn't always translate to demand, right? So you have people who will hop on just because it's free, but are they willing to pay for it, right? So you're not going to charge the same amount that you would charge for like your whole course. Maybe you charge $20, maybe you charge $50, maybe you charge something, right? To just assess the value and the demand. Because if people aren't willing to pay $50 for like a masterclass, are they really going to be willing to pay $400 for your course? So I actually say, like do a masterclass, high level, see what the demand is for that. Now, if people don't respond, it doesn't necessarily mean that your class isn't like something that people won't value. It may just mean you need to make tweaks. It may just mean you're messaging it wrong. It may mean you just messaging it as a nice to have, as opposed to a need, right? So, I would actually, that's another way. You could do the explainer video, but you could do like the landing page. But I think a masterclass is a better way to test that as well. All right. So next, you want to create systems, right? So the considerations you want to look at when you're creating your systems are: what are your key activities? What are your key resources? And what key partnerships are needed to create, to be able to provide your product or service, right? So then you want to look at the frequency of those key activities, key resources, and key partnerships. And then you want to look at the knowledge, skills, and abilities and other characteristics of your team. And then you want to look at your organizational structure. So those are all the things you want to consider when you're creating systems. So creating systems, key activities, resources, and partnerships. One of the things that business owners have the hardest challenge with, even seasoned ones, is outlining their operations. They do a lot of things from their head, right? So what you want to do is you want to identify all your key activities. So brain dump everything that you have to do in order to operate the business. Marketing, paying a light bill, sweeping each day at the end of the day, sanitizing to make sure everything's clean, paying attorneys, everything that you need to do. You want to identify all the key activities, right? And then you want to classify all of those key activities as: what are the things you got to do daily? What are the things you got to do weekly? What are the things you got to do monthly? What are the things you got to do quarterly? And what are the things you got to do annually? Because if you're able to differentiate them based on that, every day you got to check your email. Every day you got to reach out to make customer phone calls. That. Weekly you have to check your accounts. Weekly you have to this. Monthly you have to pay this bill, this bill, this bill, this bill. Quarterly you have to go to these conferences, right? So once you kind of understand that, then you can even put calendar invites or put it all on your calendar. Every day check email, 9:00. Every day reach out to potential customers for phone calls. Weekly, every Friday, check my checking account. Every Friday, do research for new potential customers, right? Every month, pay this bill on this date, right? And if you're able to like identify all of those things, whether they're daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and calendar them, then it helps you just be that much more efficient. You tend to be more. And then also, when you're bringing on employees and you identify the key activities that relate to their particular position, you can calendar them as well. And everybody knows exactly what they're supposed to do, right? So once you identify the key activities, you're gonna not only do that, but then you're gonna also identify what function those key activities serve, right? So marketing is a sales development function. Going to these workshops is a human capital professional development function. Paying my bills and cleaning the space are admin functions, right? So then when and then doing my quarterly strategic plan is strategic functions. So when you know your strategic functions, when you know your sales and business development functions, your human capital functions, and your admin functions, then you're able to divide those, and you're able to create positions basically based on those, and then everything that particular position is supposed to do. They know what they're supposed to do, and everything's smooth. So in addition to understanding key activities, you want to also understand the key resources needed to execute those key activities. So with marketing, I need Facebook. With cleaning, I need cleaning equipment. So you also want to identify the key resources that's needed as well. And then key partnerships, you want to recognize the external relationships used to execute your key activities. So let's say one of your key activities is update contracts regularly. You're not going to do that. Your attorney's going to do that, right? So your attorney is the key partnership that's assigned to that key activity, right? So you just want to understand all of those key activities. All of those are either going to have a key resource or key partnership to get it done. And then just as a bonus, if you want to understand your operational costs, and obviously it's a little bit more complicated than this, but a lot of things with business is simple mathematics. Every key activity, every key resource, every key partnership has a cost, right? And all of those costs are either daily, weekly, monthly, et cetera, et cetera. So if you assign a price tag to all of those, as well as the frequency, that's a quick way to figure out, okay, get a general idea what your operational costs are as a bonus. So also with creating systems, you want to think about what activities you can automate, especially if you're limited on time and resources. There's tools such as Calendly, which is, I didn't know had a Black founder. Calendly is a great scheduling tool. I use that regularly. You can automate your social media posts using things like Hootsuite and things like that. You can automate your intake process using things like Typeform, right? And you can automate your customer acquisition, by using things like email automation platforms. There's a ton of those out there as well. MailChimp has it now. Wix has it integrated. Like the whole email automation thing is almost in every marketing tool that you can leverage. And another thing you want to understand is when you have employees, what their knowledge, skills, and abilities are. And team members should be placed in positions where they can create the most value for your company. And their subject matter expertise, work experience, natural talents, and personality characteristics should all be considered when placing them in particular roles in your organization. Like you don't want your introvert doing your sales, right? Or you don't want your extrovert having to do the in-depth market research. It requires that they got to be by themselves and spend time alone, or I don't know. You just want to think about their personality characteristics as well, and whether or not it's a good fit for the role that you have them in. And then last but not least, you want to think about the organizational structure. How many, what's your current company size? What type of work needs to be done? So when you're able to take those key activities and categorize them, you know what type of work needs to be done, and understanding what type of decisions that need to be made. And if you understand those, then you can kind of think about where you place people. So there's 3 levels within an organization. There's the line level, which is who executes the work. There's the management level, who monitors, progress toward outcomes and maintains resources. And then there's who develops the strategy and the goals, which is the executive level. So when you're a new entrepreneur or when you're just launching, you all 3, right? You're doing the work, you're monitoring, the outcomes toward the work, and then you're developing the strategy, right? But as you're able to grow the business, your first hire is going to be line level, where they're able to execute the work and you're managing their progress while also developing strategy and goals. As you evolve more, the next level is Now you're able to hire managers. Now they're managing the people who are executing the work, and all you're doing is developing the strategies and goals, which when you're at the executive level, that's what your main responsibility is anyway, because that's when you're working on the business and not just working in the business. And then pretty much when you look at the type of decisions that need to be made, there's strategic planning and operational planning. Your first level managers tend to make the operational plans. Your middle level managers tend to do a little bit of strategic planning and operational planning. And your executives, the majority of their decision making is in strategic planning. So when you think about your own company, you can think about it from that perspective as well. And let's say you're thinking about bringing in partners, right? Let's say somebody says, I want to be your co-founder, but all they're doing is like a little operational planning. They're not going to be your chief marketing officer. They're your marketing manager, right? If they're doing, let's say they're doing, so yeah, you want to think about those things, because sometimes people will bring a founder on or a co-founder, and all they're doing is they still got to come up with the strategy, et cetera, et cetera. While that person is just doing is executing the work. That's not a co-founder. That's an employee. So like thinking about the type of decisions that have to be made, can also help you determine, what your staffing pattern should look like, whether or not a particular person fits a particular position or role. Then you want to abide by your mission, vision, and core values. So this is really important. So first of all, you want to make sure you have a mission statement and that it's 8 words or less. A mission statement describes what your company does, who the company does it for, and how your company creates value for them. The reason I say it should be 8 words or less is because when you start having 2-paragraph mission statements, you tend to lose clarity and focus. When you're able to focus on 8 words or less, it makes you think about what your company really does, what's the main value, and then let's say you're trying to do a bunch of different things. 8 words or less focus forces you to prioritize what's most important. So like 8-word and less mission statement really helps you hone in on what you do, who you do it for, and how you create value for them. Then you want to understand your core values, which are your beliefs and philosophies that guide your organizational culture and how you conduct business. So what do you believe as an entrepreneur? And, pretty much, like, do you believe in hard work? Do you believe in great customer service? Do you believe in, fill in the blank? That's going to determine who you hire and what type of and how they all interact with one another. And then last but not least, you want to think about your vision statement, which is a statement that describes your company's desired destination or the world your company is trying to create, right? So with your vision statement, you don't hop in the Uber without a destination, right? We're just going to drive around, we're going to see where we go. Same thing with business. Like, you really want to identify where are we trying to go, and a vision can be, we want to have 25% market share, or like when the app that we had that does personality compatibility, we want to create a world without strangers, right? So your vision statement should be your North Star that takes you where you want to go. And then pretty much you want to use your mission, vision, and core values to design your own organizational culture, to decide who you hire, and to decide what business opportunities to pursue and pass on, right? Because there's going to be some situation, all money isn't good money, right? So if it doesn't align with your vision, then you might want to pass on it. I even say it in the song, all money ain't good money for sure. If your mission don't align with an op, close the door, right? So let's say you're a green company. Let's, like, for example, as a nonprofit, we might have like predatory lenders reach out and try to give us money. Then we have to make a decision on whether or not we want that money. The answer is usually no in those instances, right? So, your mission, vision, and core values kind of gives you the North Star, the parameters in which to allow you to make those types of decisions. And then commandment 6, you want to make a brand promise and deliver. So pretty much a lot of people think brand's a logo, brand's my website. Your brand is the promise that you make to consumers. And it's also the prevailing narrative about your product or service. So pretty much customers are looking for a particular experience, and the experience that they expect from your product or service is the brand, right? So pretty much consistency strengthens your brand identity. So just think about it like this. I like to use this example. Let's say you have an aunt and she makes the most amazing macaroni and cheese, right? That's her brand. Auntie Jackie makes the most busting macaroni and cheese. The macaroni and cheese is amazing, right? So every time it's a holiday and she delivers on that brand promise, It's just like, oh, Auntie Jackie got the best macaroni and cheese. She got the best macaroni and cheese, right? But let's say Auntie Jackie comes for Christmas and the macaroni and cheese is not that good, right? You're not quite looking at her suspect yet, but you're like, oh, this is atypical. This is not Auntie Jackie, right? Her macaroni and cheese is usually amazing. And then she comes for Easter. Macaroni and cheese is terrible again. And it's like, this is interesting, right? Then she comes 4th of July, macaroni and cheese. And so now you're like, oh, her macaroni and cheese fell off. It's no longer good, right? So that's branding right there, right? The more you deliver on what people expect from your product or service, then the more it strengthens that. The more you weaken, the more you don't deliver it, it weakens it. And then, pretty much the ultimate recognition and the art of brand management is kind of recognizing that process and purposely doing things to strengthen your brand identity, because your brand exists whether or not you intentionally seek to create it or not. So let's say she might not, because Auntie Jackie might not be seeking to create the brand of having the most amazing macaroni and cheese. She's just cooking. But that's what people expect for her. That's the promise she makes to consumers. And as when we consume the macaroni and cheese, if she delivers on it, it strengthens the brand. If she doesn't deliver on it, it weakens it. So that's branding in a nutshell. So, as I stated, brand management is the art and science of intentionally managing your identity, brand identity. And then a great way to leverage, to develop a brand identity is these templates, which are called archetypes. And you can read about them in the book, The Hero and the Outlaw. So basically, these are personas that your business can take on that you could use to kind of create the framework of your brand identity. So these are the 12 archetypes. I know we're kind of running short on time, but like I said, if you buy the book, The Hero and the Outlaw by Margaret Mark and Carol Pearson, it explains each of them. It shows you the brands that carry that archetype. So for example, Coca-Cola is the innocent brand, which basically talks about purity and idealism. Like pretty much the regular guy gal is Walmart. The caregiver is the Red Cross. The sage is Oprah Winfrey, because instead of like having makeup lines and clothing lines, she has book clubs and Super Soul Sunday, all of these things that's designed to help you acquire knowledge. So pretty much you can kind of look at the different 12 different archetypes and find the one that fits the brand promise that you're trying to make. And that helps. Next, metrics are the key to success. So pretty much when you go to the doctor, they tell you what your blood pressure, are. What's your what's your blood sugar? What's your oxygenation rate and things like that, right? So if you meet certain numbers, if you're under 120/80, your blood pressure is fine. If your blood sugar is over 120, there's the issue, right? Or, so pretty much these metrics let you know the health of your body, right? And that's how business is. Like your metrics let you know the health of your business. So if you say, I need X amount of sales, your burn rate is the amount of money that you're spending each month on your overhead, your customer acquisition cost, how much it costs to get a customer, product revenue. You define the metrics that really help that identify growth for your business or the health of your business, and then you can evaluate your business based on those metrics. So your goals that you create, as far as your metrics, should be smart. They should be specific, so they should be measurable. They should be attainable, so it should be realistic for you to reach them. If you said I'm gonna sell 2 million, my first month, and you just launched, that's not attainable, right? But saying I'm gonna reach 5,000 my first month might be reasonable. Relevant. So the metric should be relevant to your business's growth, and there should be time bound. So I'll say make a monthly, quarterly, annually, et cetera, et cetera. So when you look at your metrics, they should fit those characteristics. And then also another thing you want to understand is your ratios for your business. So the amount of a resource needed to execute a business function. So for example, if a cleaning business can clean 10 houses a week, with 3 workers at the cost of $30 per employee, if they want to scale to clean 30 houses in a week, how many workers would they need, right? So if they're cleaning 3 houses, if they can clean 10 houses a week, right? And then now they want to clean 30, they could do it with 3 workers. Now they need 9 workers in order to clean those 30 houses. And then there's a salary cost associated with those 3 workers, right? So those 3 workers are all getting $30 an hour. I mean, $30, $15 an hour for 2 hours on average to clean out the house. So pretty much now you got to take that. Now you got to take that $90 it costs to clean those 3 houses, and then you gotta scale that up as well times 3. So now it's $270. To clean all of those houses as well. So this is like simple. This is like a simplified version of it, but it's the rationale you need to have when you're asking for capital to scale your business, right? Because a lot of times business owners, they ask for an amount that sounds good. They don't ask for an amount based on their ratios. Because the thing is, if you know the profit for how much it's going to cost that you make off of each house, right? You know how much it costs for each worker, you know how much it costs for supplies. If you're trying to scale up, all you're doing is multiplying all of that up. And that tells you how much you can expect to make. That tells you how much it expects to cost. That tells you, how much your labor costs are going to be. So now you can ask for money, or you can get financing that's based on actual numbers. That's probably actually what you need, as opposed to not asking for enough or for asking too much. Commandment number 8, plan the business. So I'm going to emphasize this. Planning the business is more important than having a business plan in the beginning. I repeat, planning the business is more important than having a business plan in the beginning. So as I stated earlier, there's 2 stages of a business after identifying your idea. So after the opportunity identification, there's opportunity exploration and opportunity exploitation. They both require different planning processes. So the exploration stage is when your science experiment is taking place, right? And since you don't know who the customer is yet, and you don't know what the exact offering is, you can't develop a long-term business plan because you haven't validated the concept. And this is why a lot of people struggle with business plans, identifying finances, and things like that when they have a business idea before they've launched, because you can't. You literally can't, right? You can't predict a year out if you don't even know if the offering is something the customer wants, if you don't even know the exact makeup of the customer, et cetera, et cetera. So in these instances, it's best to use what's called a lean canvas, or you can use a business model canvas to explore the opportunity and learn. So the lean canvas and the business model canvas are basically 1-page business plans, if you will, that basically allow you to outline the different components of the business and evaluate it. So the lean canvas is actually best for startup because it's a learning tool, right? Because there's a metrics component within the lean canvas that you can set your metrics and then you can go out and test the value. But then let's say, so you go through the science project, you go through the exploration stage, and now you've identified who your customer is, what product or service they want, at what price they want it, and how many people you can expect to get a month. Now you can create a business plan, right? So once you're in the exploitation stage, the science project is complete and the business concept is validated. Now you can predict cash flow that's being generated, and you can identify the ideal customer that's been validated. Now you can project out 3 years. And I'm gonna be honest, even 3 years now is a stretch. In the past, they used to tell you 5 years, 3, yeah, but really, to be honest, like 1 to 2 years, because technology and the market changes so much and things like that. So, but at the most, you can plan out about 3 years once you kind of develop the exploitation stage. Once you're in the exploitation stage, now you can do a business plan because everything's known. You don't have enough data to do a business plan in the exploration stage. So if you haven't launched the business yet and it doesn't exist, you really can't do a business plan until you identify everything and you explore and you run a science project. Commandment number 9, create a B2B business model. So I'm biased toward B2B business models. Why? Because business consumer business models are a little bit more expensive and a little bit harder to gain traction. So for those who aren't familiar, business to consumer business models are businesses that sell to individual consumers, and B2B business models, business to business business models are businesses that sell to other businesses. And pretty much, Facebook started off as business to consumer, but nobody wanted to pay for Facebook, so they had to come up with a B2B business model anyway, right? Their advertising, they sell to businesses. Google, the search is free, but they still had to come up with a B2B business model anyway, right? So, or like, let's say you have, Tinder was free. Now Tinder has a premium package, which is charging a little bit more, but, that's mostly a business to consumer product still. But for the most part, there's several advantages of having a B2B business model over a B2C business model. So I'm not saying don't ever do a B2C business model, but in order to really grow business, you're going to eventually need a B2B model anyway. So the marketing costs are cheaper with a business to business model because you don't have as many customers you have to target. Like, for example, if let's say you're talking to an investor and you have a platform. If you have a B2C platform, you probably need like 10,000 subscribers or 10,000 users. If you have a B2B technology platform, you got 5 companies that use your platform. They're going to invest in you, or they're more likely to invest in you because you have some traction, right? So there's cheaper marketing costs. There's fewer transactions needed to gain traction. There's greater margins because you can charge companies more for the offering, and then because they have utility for it. And then the B2C business most B2C businesses need to supplement their B2C strategy with a B2B strategy anyway, right? So even if you have like a bakery, right, and you got mostly business to consumer folks, you can scale your business and get additional visibility by, creating, selling your baked goods in Walmart, selling your baked goods in Whole Foods, et cetera, et cetera. B2B business model. So since you got to do a B2B business model anyway, it's smart to start thinking about it early on in the process. And then last but not least, you want to know your customer. I ain't leaving no time for questions. I mean, if any people are willing to stay on long enough, if the city's able to, I'll take a few questions. But last but not least, you want to know your customer. You need to know who your ideal customer is for your offering. First, you will initially hypothesize about these before you know who your customer is. So at first, this is a hypothesis. What are the pain points? We talked about that. What are their demographics? What are their geographics, which is where they're located, virtually and in the physical world? What's their psychographics? So what are their beliefs, their thoughts, their preferences, their likes, and their tastes? And then last but not least, what's their trigger behaviors? So what are the things that engage them in buying behavior? So for example, if I'm a flower shop, Valentine's Day is a trigger event. If I'm a flower shop, upsetting my girlfriend is a trigger behavior, right? So you want to understand that about your customer. What triggers them to buy the product or service? What are their psychographics? What do they believe? Preferences, tastes, likes? Where are they located? Who are they? Race, ethnicity, industry. If it's B2B, revenue. Annual revenue or annual income, et cetera, and what pain do they have, right? So as you sell and you get customers, you get data. So now you might find that I thought that this was their demographic. I thought that like men of this particular age was going to buy this product or service, but men of this age buy the product or service. I thought that these type of companies wanted this product or service, but these are the only companies who've been buying from me. So once you keep track of that data, and then you make adjustments to your ideal customer profile as well. You frequently talk to customers to validate their psychographics and triggers. Surveys, questionnaires, conversations to understand why they're buying the product, why they're buying what's triggering them to purchase it, et cetera, et cetera. And then you also want to make adjustments to your customer profile as new data presents itself. So once you start getting sales, the sales tell you who your customer is, and then you make adjustments based on that, and to fine tune your ideal customer profile. So you're doing that during the science experiment as well. Thinking about who the customer is, et cetera, et cetera. And then once you know who the customer is, you're able to go ahead and get into the exploitation stage and start scaling the business. So that's everything. Does anybody have any questions?
Hi, Jason. It's Elisa with BACP. I want to thank you on behalf of all attendees for the presentation. It was extremely informative. We got really good feedback, very positive feedback. I think the video helped. And I'm looking to see if any questions came through that weren't already answered. We'll give a couple minutes for a question or two to come on. I do want to say that this webinar is being recorded and we will make it available on the BACP YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Chicago BACP. I will put that link in the chat. If anyone has any questions, we'll give it a minute or two to have you guys type them in. I do not see any questions coming through right now. Jason, is there an email perhaps? Oh, there it is. Perfect. Yes. If someone wants to contact you or the Chicago Urban League, what's the best way they can do that?
I just put it in the chat. That's my Urban League email, and then this is our Entrepreneurship Center page. I just put both on.
Okay, and for those joining us via phone, the email address is jjohnson with an H at chiul.org. And the website is chiurbanleaguecei.com. And you could also find Jason on LinkedIn, so please connect with him. It was a wealth of information, so thank you so much for starting your Friday with us and getting everyone pumped and excited for their future plans. So thank you.
Thank you. I just hope everybody found it valuable. So just, I'm available. I share contact information. If anyone needs to connect with me, you can do so during those using those contact information. Excuse me.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much once again. We hope everyone will have a really good Friday and a good weekend. Once again, we will be posting this webinar probably this afternoon or early Monday morning, technology allowing, of course, on our YouTube channel. So thank you so much again for joining us and have a good Friday.
All right, everybody.